وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد عبده ورسوله وما بعد. Continuing our lessons on Islam and Atheism. Last week we spoke about one of the emotional arguments they talk about or they use in relation to religion and violence. And we explained that there is no real connection, a necessary connection between the two, that religion causes violence. Rather, we concluded that people who are violent can use religion as a source for their violence, like they can use other means and reasons. We also explained that the religious texts, specifically Islam, don't lead to a propensity or a reason for violence. And that led into another discussion, which is to do with a doubt regarding the status or the impacts of religion on society. And that is, atheists and secularist people argue that religion causes people or countries to become weak economically or politically, and that the cause for the problems of society is religion. This is their argument. And it's a very common one that many Muslims themselves believe in some ways, because when they look at the Muslim countries and they see the problems, they assume that this is to do with Islam. Means if you go back home and you see the Muslims behaving badly or poorly, this must be due to the deen that they adopt. But the problem with this, as we'll see, is that it doesn't go with evidence, because it assumes that the practicing of our faith today must be so good, or at least good, such that our dunya is not good. But the reality is that we know as Muslims that the practice of the latter generations is not as good as the earlier ones. And the earlier generations, Islam was more powerful. So how do we make sense of that? The past, they were more religious, and the Muslim Ummah was stronger before. So today we're weaker, not because we are more practicing, it's because we're not practicing as much. This is what we're going to argue. But atheists and secularists, this is their problem. They create what we say like kind of a wrong image. For example, if you go to the Cambridge Companion to Atheism or Oxford Companion to Atheism, and you read their section about secularism and non-belief in Western nations, they argue, and this is an argument promoted by sociologist Phil Zuckerman. He's probably the most famous in this push for the godless society. They say in that book, The Cambridge Companion to Atheism, that rather societal health seems to cause widespread atheism, and societal insecurity seems to cause widespread belief in God, as has been demonstrated, and they bring some resources. So their argument is, when people are secure and stable, more disbelief. And when society is not stable, more belief. Why? Because belief would then be a coping mechanism for the calamities of the society. It means when people are poor and there's civil unrest, people become religious as a coping mechanism for their failure in society. The problem obviously with this is that, as convincing it might sound, it can be addressed in many ways. First, they're right though in the first part, that the societal health, i.e. good societies, wealthy societies in the West and beyond that, tend to engender or breed more atheism. So there is a connection between atheism and societies which have more wealth and stability. So Phil Zuckerman, the sociologist, he was a secularist, he says, I think it's when you have what you call existential security. That is, wealth and prosperity are part of that, but by that we mean the bulk of people in society have access to housing, healthcare, jobs. They live in a relatively stable democratic society without much in the way of existential threats to their lives or their culture. In other words, when people are secure in their dunya, they feel like they don't need Allah. Okay, we agree with that. We said this is why you guys are kuffar or malahida. We believe that. That's why atheism is caused or connected with affluence. Because when there's existential security, you're not scared of losing your life for the war, civil war, animals, whatever. Then you start wondering, well, what do I need religion for? And isn't that the question we hear nowadays? Young people saying that, why do I need religion? Well, the only reason you ask the question is because you're here. Right? Go ask someone back home that question. Right? The question would be that, What can I do without religion? But here, because everything's comfortable, we start saying, well, religion benefits me. كَلَّا إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لِيَطْغَى أَن رَآهُ اسْتَغْنَى. So Allah already told us, mankind really transgresses, he thinks himself to be self-sufficient. Khalas, that's psychology of the wealthy. Pay attention then. Because we know in our society, this is why our men of youth have that problem. Right? He's swimming in Allah's blessings and he's wondering why we need Allah. All you have is Allah's blessings, and the greatest of it is deen. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes someone blind, then he's going to look at the things Allah gave him and forgot the one who gave it to him. He looks at the ni'mah and forgot the mun'im. You have the ni'am, all the blessings, and where's the mun'im? Who gave it to you? So we agree with that point that yes, atheism grows in societies which are wealthier because of the fact that he says existential security. They feel safe from any immediate danger, so they start questioning the need for religion. Also, education. He mentioned education is another aspect of prosperity that plays a role in religiosity. So it comes a 2009 study, it's a bit old, which says that 52,000 people in 57 countries, they did a survey and they found that religiosity decreased as education levels increased. And that's also proven. The more secular studies we have, the more we question faith and deen or lower iman or even become mulhid. This will help us to understand why most of the questions the youth who are atheists, where are they coming from? The campus. Right? You're not going to see some people mulhid in the masjid, right? How can he? He made sujood. He heard the Quran. It touched his heart. But the person is in the university, he's not praying. And this is very important, brothers and sisters, to understand this. Someone who's not says to have doubts about Allah, don't worry too much. Don't be surprised. If you know the reason, right? Amazement disappears. You're in campus, right? You don't pray that much, right? Khalas. You have all the security. Yeah, I understand. That's why you're there. But the question should be, if you are in this position, well, why are you not questioning Allah's existence or religion? He's using his memory, mind, right? His education, and he's questioning the fitrah Allah put in us. So some studies found the awam, and this is important, Ami, why is he so religious? Because he's more in tune with the fitrah. He's already in tune with the fitrah, so he knows Allah exists. Where else did I come from? Now go to someone educated, he's using his brain against his fitrah. He's saying, doesn't make sense. Istafti qalbak, ask your heart, don't ask your brain. He's asking his mind. So why is this important? Secular education, what does it do? It puts the emphasis on empirical research and studies. So you put your trust in that more than your intuition. Awam are intuitive, hence they believe immediately Allah exists. But a person who studies in secular education, his understanding of the world has to be empirical, by studies. So he trusts that against his gut or his qalb. So if you give an example, people who are educated, they say it doesn't make sense. And we're telling them, but what is your heart telling you? Fir'aun said Allah doesn't exist. In his heart, he believed it. So we must understand that how our secular system, education, what it does to the youth. Right? It also shows you a problem. We're sending our youth to the deep end and they don't know the aqidah. Right? Then they're going to start saying, it doesn't make sense. Aqidah has to do with the heart. I know you believe in the heart, but you have to strengthen someone's understanding that there's other ways of knowing. So it's not to say education is haram, but understand where they put the emphasis. And we go to the Quran then. Allah says about Fir'aun, we said he's the earliest atheist, right, in the Quran, the ancient Egyptians, and Fir'aun specifically. He had extreme power and wealth. Allah says, how many gardens and springs did the Fir'aun and his people left? And green crops and goodly places and comforts of life wherein they used to delight. Right, Surah Jathiyah. Right? So Allah mentions that they have all these wealth. Such that Musa alayhi salam, he made that connection. Right? So it's important. Musa knew that Fir'aun was using his wealth in Surah Yunus, ayah 88. Fir'aun was using his wealth in order to misguide his people. وقال موسى ربنا إنك آتيت فرعون وملأه زينة وأموالا في الحياة الدنيا. Oh Allah, Musa said, oh my Lord, you have given Fir'aun and his chiefs zeen, the adornment of this wealth, of this dunya and the wealth. ربنا ليضلوا عن سبيلك. My Lord, they're using to misguide the people. ربنا تمس عن أموالهم. Oh Allah, take and destroy their wealth. وَاسْتُدْ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ. And harden their hearts. فَلَا يُؤْمِنُوا حَتَّى يَرَوْا عَذَابَ الْأَلِيمِ. Make them not believe until they see severe punishment. So this ayah, chapter 10, verse 88, very important connection. Musa identifies, alayhi salam, what's Fir'aun doing? He has a lot of wealth. So what did Fir'aun say? أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. Okay, he has so much, he said, I'm Allah. See the Nile River? I put it there. Right? Of course, the people themselves were blameworthy for believing such nonsense. But the fact that he believed that with his wealth and money, then he's using it, لِيُدِلُّ عَنْ سَبِيلِكَ. So Allah, Musa makes dua to Allah to take away his wealth and harden his hearts. And that's why they didn't believe, right, those who followed him until they got punished. Alamat al-Sa'di says in his tafsir, rahimahullah, in this ayah, which they adorn themselves with, the different types of jewelry, clothing, decorated houses, luxurious riding animals, servants, great wealth. 2, and Allah Musa says that they may lead men astray. That is, the wealth did not aid them except in the misguidance from your path, so they misguided themselves and others. Chapter 10, verse 88, Tafsir Alamat al-Sa'di. So the misguidance of Fir'aun, what was it? His arrogance and his oppression and his disbelief. So we can see now the secularists are right when they say that wealth is connected to atheism. We agree. A lot of wealth and security leads people to become transgressive, and one of the biggest ways is to leave faith and deny Allah's existence. But the problem with this guy Zuckerman and those people like him, their conclusion goes beyond it. He says, by taking into consideration a wide array of indicators of societal well-being, the correlation is clear. The most secular societies on earth, with the highest rates of non-belief, fare much better on average than the most religious, strongly believing societies. And this is the shubha we're trying to deal with. He concludes then, if this is clear, then the outcomes of non-religious states, secular states, is that they have better qualities of life than religious states, which is, secularism is better. And this is what he has a book called The Godless Society. This is what he tries to argue. Now, for many of the Muslims, they actually believe this. Many Muslims, you see them, they believe this in some way, either immediately, implicitly, or explicitly. That back home, the problem we have is the Muslims. Yes, the Muslims, not Islam, right? But the problem some people have is that why are we behind and they're up? The problem is that there's no history here. It's just a looking at the immediate situation. Time Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sahaba, the golden eras of Islam, Islam was up and deen, and the dunya was up. Slowly went up, right? Went from difficulties to the highest point, especially after the death of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Khilaf Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and then things became difficult in time Ali, and it started going down. But even then, with that difficulty, was still up. The problem now is that what this guy is saying, Zuckerman, atheists and secular societies, they're doing well. Why? So he attributed their success to their aqidah. Is that correct? No, it's not correct. That's the first mistake. The attribution of Western society's success does not do with the aqidah. It's at the expense of the aqidah. Because their beliefs are not based on their beliefs, their values, they're based on Christianity. Where does human rights come from? Right? What's the idea of human rights? All humans have God-given rights? Well, God doesn't exist. Where do you get rights from? So they have to co-opt the value system from Christianity. That's one. Number two, all those battles that are fought in order to purify the ranks of the people. Who was fighting? Atheists? Secularists? No, they were Christians. They're fighting. Later, you find even the people who are misguiding and corrupting society. Most of the problems of the world come from secular thought process, as we'll see in a second. But we have a bigger question, which is, what about Islam? Does Islam or religion make things better or worse? New atheists say that all religion poisons everything. Right? This is what we said last week. Richard Christopher Hitchens, right? He says in his book, God is not great, why religion poisons everything. Right? This is his title of a book. Imagine this is what someone's writing. But today we have to ask the question: how does Islamic perspective, from our perspective, material luxury and comforts and the society we have today with political strife, economic weakness, is that because of Islam or is it because of other reasons? So the first answer we're going to give is that to attribute the failure of religious states to religion is a false cause fallacy. Because the cause for the Muslims' downfall or our problems is not deen, it has to do with a mixture of many causes, amongst them being foremost the fact that we're not practicing our deen. So we're going to say there's a multitude of causes for the Muslim situation. Not religion, okay? Part of it is that we're not practicing, but it's not the only reason. Other things have to do with colonization. Right? We can't forget that, post-colonial state. We always forget that. That's the big one. You can't forget it. Right? 200 or years or more of colonization, you're going to pretend like we're all on the same playing field. The reason I'm saying that is because if you go backwards, Africa was rich, then it became poor. Kaif. Right? The resources are still there. How did it become poor? So these are the questions that if you look at our history students and brothers, we always start our history where? In the Western world, 21st century. They love it. Right? They always skip because slavery and colonization, the darkest parts of the world, then they say, oh yeah, we jump over to the 48 downwards. Right? After we beat Hitler. It's like, well, what happened before that? And it's very important to understand multiple causes. So we said last time, if you want to figure out a cause for something, there are multiple causes. But what the atheist argument is making is that religious states are failed because of deen. This is called a singular causation or causality. Singular causality is a very hard case to make. Pay attention. Singular causality is called. When you make an outcome of something, the outcome is caused by one single cause. So, for example, you know how they say in science the dinosaurs were destroyed, extinct by the asteroid. Wallahu alam, right? That's what they're telling us. Wallahu alam, right? But let's just go with their thing. That's one cause. They say the asteroid came, took all of them out. Okay, طيب, that's what you guys are telling us. That's called singular causation. One cause, one effect. What's this argument saying now? Muslims, Christians, Jews, anyone's Muslim, anyone's religious, their societies are bad because of deen. Is that correct? No. So single cause is false cause. Multitude of causes, that's the first one. Secondly, as Muslims, we understand other causes. So we say that's called the fallacy, because he made the whole case of the society down because of one cause, which is the religion, which is not true. And the proof of it, as we're going to see in a second, is history itself. Right? That's why history is important, brothers and sisters. We have to know history. But we're going to, before we get there, second thing we know. In Islam, having wealth and success doesn't mean that you are more successful or praiseworthy or Allah loves you more. Okay, so the metric that the secular is using is flawed. Because he's a materialist, he's going to use a material measure. So what is he saying? Look at our society, we have better health care. Since when does that make your judgment of your country better? You also have more HIV and suicide and more other cases of violence and corruption. Does that mean that those factors don't count? They count. But what they're trying to say is, if we look at material metrics, we're better off. طيب, in Islam we have answers to this. والدليل حديث عمر حديث ابن عباس بالبخاري Muslim. Sorry, this is Tirmidhi, Sahih Tirmidhi. Ibn Abbas, there's Ibn Umar said, رضي الله عنه, one day I came in to Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam's house. Right? I raised my head, I did not see. I went inside the house. He says, فَرَفَعْتُ رَأْسِي. When I went to his house, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, فَمَا رَأَيْتُ فِي الْبَيْتِ. I went inside the Prophet's house. I did not see anything inside the house. إِلَّا أَهَبَةً ثَلَاثًا, except for 3 pieces of leather hide. فَقُلْتُ, I said, يا رسول الله, أُدْعُ اللَّهَ أَن يُوَسِّعَ على أُمَّتِك. Ya Rasulullah, make dua, Allah makes more for our ummah. That sounds familiar? Today someone's going to say, what's wrong with our society? What is he measuring? He's looking at the material, he's not looking at the other things. The purpose of life is ibadah, right? I didn't think the purpose of life is good healthcare, good education. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, here Umar is bothered by the fact that Prophet sallallahu is a prophet, yet he's in poverty. This is what bothered him. Why is he in poverty? So Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Umar said, فَقَدْ وَسَّعَ عَلَى فَارِسْ وَالرُّومِ. The Persians and the Romans, Allah gave them a lot. وَهُمْ لَا يَعْبُدُونَهُ, and they don't worship Him. So you see, there's the part we're all getting. If we're upon haqq, why are they rich and we're poor? And what? Go back to Qissa Hudaybiyah. أَلَسْنَا عَلَى الْحَقِّ وَهُمْ عَلى الْبَاطِلِ. Are we upon truth, they're upon falsehood? قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فاستوى جالس, and the Nabi jumped up sitting. فقال أو في شك أنت يا ابن الخطاب? You have any doubt, Ibn Khattab? Look at this wording. أو في شك, are you in doubt, Umar? Brothers, this is our remedy today. Someone sitting there, the professor is telling them, what's wrong with your country? Why are you guys poor? And you're thinking, you're right. How did we get poor? I thought we had money. Brothers, he's tricking us. We don't know anything. That's why you're miskeen. You don't know anything. Don't have doubts. He's upon this guidance. If he got doubt, he wouldn't be doubtful. If you told him answer, he still wouldn't believe you. But he told you shubha, you believed him. That's our problem, right? He brought you nonsense, you believed it. If you brought him ilm, he wouldn't believe you. The Nabi sallallahu said, أولئك قوم, these are the people, عجلت لهم طيبات في حياة الدنيا. Allah has pursued all the wealth in the dunya already. Allah hastened their worldly life. As for us, it comes to akhirah. So he will learn a benefit. Hadith Sahih Tirmidhi 33:18. This hadith is powerful. Number 1, it shows you how old the doubt is. Number 2, the answer. Muslims, our metric of guidance is based on how much we practice the deen and worship Allah. And with that comes the wealth of the dunya. But even at times of poverty, if you have deen, you put on guidance, Allah loves you. Because إِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ قَوْمٍ ابْتَلَاهُمْ. When Allah loves the people, test them. As for the non-Muslim, Allah gives the dunya irrespective of the belief. As Umar said, وَوَسَّعَ عَلَى فَارِسْ وَرُمْ وَهُمْ لَا يَعْبُدُونَهُ. Why Allah gives them the dunya, not us? The ulama explain, like Muna'ad Qari, he says, just as Allah informed us in the Quran, that He rebuked them, the disbelievers on the Day of Judgment, on that day when those who disbelieve will be exposed to the fire, and it will be said to them, you received your good things in this life or this world, and you took pleasure therein. Now is the day you should be recompensed for torment of humiliation. Chapter 46, verse 20. So here, Surah Qaf, Allah tells us that's what's going to tell them. Your people, Allah gave you everything. Because the dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir. You with me? The kafir is always going to have dunya because this is Jannah. Pay attention, yours is coming. But if our Jannah we're talking about is not only material and immaterial, means spiritual. So a time when the Muslims were weak and poor, like in the Meccan period, they're upon raha, upon comfort and ease. Because you have the Quran, ibadah, deen, and you get hasanat for the difficulty. And when the Muslims were successful and victorious at the end of the seerah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they also had the deen, ibadah, and the dunya. This is the wasila and that's the ghaya. When we didn't have the wasila, we still have the ghaya. Today, people are mixed the two. Healthcare, education is wasa'il. They're means to what? An end. What's the end? Ibadah. What is Allah? Allah's pleasure. Today, some people think that's the ghaya. For the kafir, it's the ghaya because he has nothing else. يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنْ حَيَاةِ الدُّنْيا. That's all they know. وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. Pay attention. Why are you using their metrics to measure us? And why don't you know your own value? And if we were to measure now our ummah, because we're going to get to our deeper explanation, you can already see that's a bad metric. So it's the wrong discussion anyways. It's like saying, how come we have more dunya than you? Because you're kafir or mu'min. We're going to Jannah, but we'll see then. Another response will be, well, after colonization, and after all the things that happen, of course, we're going to be poor and trouble the communities because of what you did to us as a community and as a third, what we call today the third world. قال الله تعالى about the time of Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يغرنك تقلب الذين كفروا في البلاد. Let not the free disposal and the affluence of disbelievers throughout the land deceive you. متاع قليل, it's a small enjoyment or brief. مأواهم جهنم, and ثم مأواهم جهنم, then the next abode is Jahannam. وبئس المهاد. This is Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3, verse 196, 197. Allah is telling us, the time of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they traveled the earth freely. Did any of the Sahaba have shak about that? Abu Jahl is going to Heraclius, Abu Sufyan went to Heraclius, they traveled back and forth. إِلَى فِيهِمْ رِحْتِ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ. Quraysh are going east and west and business, on shirk, the shirk. No one's going to say, well, Umar, when he felt that way, Nabi has clarified to him. But today what's happening, some people think, even time of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Muslims didn't have periods where they were in poverty before prosperity. It's the sunnah of Allah. For every period we have prosperity, there's going to be poverty. Brothers, so you have to know history. It goes up and down. They're called, right, ebbs and flows or peaks and valleys, right? Many Muslims, they don't get it. We're living post-colonial. We're living the lowest time. But does that mean we're not going back up? We are, but you don't know. The same time I told you about the past, you didn't know. So there's the first, that's the real essence of the problem. An average Muslim doesn't know tariq wala mustaqbal. He doesn't know the future, doesn't know the past. He's sitting there saying, what's wrong with us? How old are you? Right? How long would Muslims be in trouble? Tell me 15th century you were going to be talking like that. 17th century, up until the 17th century, Muslims were up. But what happened? After that period, and you can see this, Muslims in Morocco and the Mughal dynasty in India and in the Abbas and the Uthmanis, all of them collapsed. On the 19th century, it was finished by our strength. But up until then, and if you want evidence, brothers and sisters, the people who wrote about secularism, what time period they were living? 17th, 18th century. Their founding fathers used to dress like Muslims, speak Islam, write about Islam, and some even almost became Muslims, some of them. And I want to talk about that period because a lot of Muslims don't know the people who are writing kufr or shirk, the aqeedah, the dastur that these people have, the documents. Many of them, they loved Islam not because they had to, because it was a superpower. They liked Islam for its power. So to give you an example, today we live in the 21st century, we're down. Right? So dunya-wise, after what's happened, Allah was testing us. So there's poverty and there's prosperity. Right? تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ وَنُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Allah changes dynasties like this. Okay, so right now we're down. Go back 300 years ago, Muslims were up. What's wrong with the youth today? They're getting the panic and the worry because they think this is going to be the state. إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. What kind of aqeedah is that? Whose aqeedah is that? Who doesn't know what's happening when Isa Mahdi come? What's going to happen? That's another golden period coming. I'm going to talk about it in a second. It's coming, right? So the Muslim right now, we have sabr in this moment because we know where we came, where we're going. Which leads us to the point that if the argument of secularists was correct, that Islam is the cause for the Muslims' weakness, then why was it that at the time when the Muslims were most practicing, we had the most dunya? Right? What Khilafah Umar? How much did Umar run of the Muslim world? His Khilafah ran 2/3 in no world. It's Umar praying Salat, yeah, he's reading Quran. They're the most practicing people you're going to find. 2/3 in known world. And then comes Uthman's time. The Muslims just expanding and they're praying Salah, they read Quran. They have the best deen possible. So there we find what's called counterfactual. Counterfactual is when someone brings you evidence, you bring evidence that doesn't fit with his evidence, khalas, the argument is finished. If deen causes poverty, then why were the Muslims more practicing richer? If deen causes no science, for example, some people think science goes against deen, then you don't know history. Because we didn't have no scientific revolution in the Ummah. Scientific revolution is what happened to the Christians, right? The Galileo moment. You guys know they studied that Galileo and the church had a problem. Muslims, we never had that. The only time in history we had a problem, Mu'tazila came and made problem. Mu'tazila, pseudo-rationals, he made the fitna. When they got power, they did mihna. كيف يعني? Pay attention, guys. The only time. Every scientist in Islam who flourished lived in time of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, when the government was Ahl Sunnah, or the Muslims were majority Ahl Sunnah. The single time the Mu'tazila took over, they did mihna. All the power they used to test people, do you believe the Quran is created or not? So one guy did a presentation, look at the history of the greatest scientists, Khawarizmi, you name it, anyone you think of. They were at a time when either Ahl Sunnah were a majority, or the government was Ahl Sunnah, or they supported Ahl Sunnah. The one time the Mu'tazila deviants took over, they did mihna. So what does this mean? When the people rationalists came, they ruined science in Islam. Here are people today saying we need to go back to the old days. What old days? The days when the Malahida were to charge, we're going to have mihna then, another one. So us as Muslims, we never had no Galileo moment. Christians have this problem because in their history, Christianity couldn't get along with scientists because they thought the scientists are changing their beliefs of the Bible. Muslims, when we're up, is when the deen was up. We were down when our deen went down. That's it. And if you want to prove of it, read history, Islamic history from time of Rasulullah's death and his time all the way to the Uthmanist collapse. You tell me, which dynasty didn't have deen, didn't have hudud, didn't have salat jama'ah, didn't have qira'at Quran, madaris everywhere? And it's very interesting that this part of history, brothers and sisters, is erased from our minds on purpose. We have to study it. We actually have to. Because if you don't, then you're going to have that shubha. Umar asked out of general worry. Us, people are asking because they believe this. So to give us an example, in the 17th, 18th century, when atheism were first emerging, the biggest of them, David Hume. You can Google it on your phone if you want. David Hume, one of the biggest atheists from Scotland. Take a look at what he's wearing on his head. David Hume, mulhid, wearing a turban. He looks like a Turk. Because that time, that was the fashion. Turkish was so powerful and they're so influential that a mulhid was wearing a turban and he doesn't believe in Allah. At that time, no one's asking that question. Everyone's going to ask, where's your shoes at? What are you wearing? Turkish shoes and Turkish clothing? Until even they found history, you can read it. English people, because that time England had a problem with France and Spain. So English people will go to get work where? Turkey. Guys, it sounds familiar? Migration for work, right? At the Queen Elizabeth, King James time, people were making a safar for months to go to Istanbul to work. They're getting visas to work in Istanbul. And they came back, some of them saying, we're Muhammadan Trinitarians. You know what I mean? We believe in one Lord. Muhammadan, because we believe in Tawheed of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but their Tawheed was one God only. You know, Jesus, we're just one. Muhammadan Trinitarians, brother. Can you imagine that? They saw the dunya ma fiha when they came to Istanbul. Because they're masakin. You can go read in London. They're in a bad state. When they came to Istanbul, they said, Allahu Akbar. What's this? When Muslims came to Spain, you got to read this one, 715 CE. Maybe some died 632. 715. The Tabi'un were already in Spain. And then went to right after France. Most Muslims don't know that. We were in Spain, France right after that. We stayed in France up until the 1500s, 1700s, time of the Ottomans. And Muslims were there, you can say for that duration, which explains the problem between Muslims and French. Right? You can read about that. But the fact that Muslims were vacationing in Monaco, the place they have the film festivals today, we were sitting there as Muslims, vacationing the same place they sat. This history shows us what when Muslims came to Spain, what did they do? They didn't go and ask for handouts. They brought everything with them. The deen taught them that you have to take care of the land. An example, Portugal, as we know, the place where there's like nice fruits and vegetation. Muslims, they brought the economy and the trees for the oranges. We brought the trees, forget about the fruit. We brought the tree too. There was nothing there. These are things in history well documented. That's why anyone who knows the history knows the Muslims' contributions cannot be ignored. But the problem is the lay Muslim who thinks secularism brought the dunya. What did they bring? What value? Show me what value that's uniquely secular or atheist. Show me one outcome that they have that no one preceded them. And this leads to another problem which we have, which is that if this is the case, then why are the Muslims the way they are? Our answer is because we're not practicing our deen. And some ulama already mentioned that. We're not practicing our deen. That's why we're behind. Not because Islam is the problem. Okay? You have to understand that history is the biggest proof. بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَهُمْ تَارِيخ. If you don't know history, you have to know it. You have to get it and read, and you'll be shocked. Because at that time, if someone told you, I'm a Muslim, I practice Islam, they'd be like, this guy is superior to us. And I mentioned this before. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he used this argumentation in Jawab al-Sahih. And in Jawab al-Sahih, from the end argument Ibn Taymiyyah presents, he tells the Christians, look at you, even if we're better than you in dunya. Our math is better, our science is better, your lifestyle is lower. He's talking about the dunya after he finished them all the aqeedah. Even your dunya is lower than ours. And they couldn't deny it. And Ibn Taymiyyah used word, he's 7th century, 8th century guys. So time with Muslim weak, still better than theirs. Because of the deen, not at the expense of it, due to it. And this now goes to the point that many Muslims have, which is that if this is the case, why do Muslims have the upper hand today? We already said it's because we're not practicing our deen. Who mentioned this point? Well, it's mentioned, for example, Ibn Ashur in his Tafsir Tahrir wa Tanwir, volume 18, page 285. He writes, and the ayat Surah Nur, Wa'ad Allah already promised, right? He's going to give us a khilafah. He mentioned under the ayah, after Allah mentions if you believe and do good deeds and do tawheed, the shurut are there. So we can see now the Muslim falls short of the promise of Allah, then the wa'ad is mashrut. The wa'ad, Allah's promise, is stipulated, is conditioned. He says, فَلَوْ أَنَّ قَوْمًا غَيْرَ مُسْلِمِينَ عَمِلُوا فِي سِيرَتِهِمْ وشؤون رعيتهم بمثل ما أمر الله به مسلمين من الصالحات بحيث لم يعزوهم إلا الإيمان بالله ورسوله. Right? He said, if the non-Muslims, if they were to practice in their affairs what Allah has commanded the Muslim to do, of the good deeds, without attributing it to Islam or the likes of this, then he says, and these affairs, right, تلك أعمال صارت أسبابا وسننا ترتب عليها آثارها التي جعل الله سننا وقوانين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them the fruits and the outcomes that come with these kinds of practices. So what is he saying? That non-Muslims are doing what we used to do in terms of the justice in the system, right? Trying to do justice in their courts, in their systems, trying to make sure they're taking care of the poor and needy, trying to make all the things that Muslims have in the Sharia, but maybe our societies are not doing the best. He says, أَلَا تَرَى now, don't you see, he says, and then قادة الأوروبيين, right, the leaders of the Europeans, بعد أن اقتبسوا من الإسلام قوانينه, after they've taken Islam's rulings from them, ونظامه and their systems, ما مارسوا من شؤون المسلمين, after they have overtaken our affairs by way of crusades and colonization. After they've taken all this, they take it from what? كتب السيرة التاريخ الإسلامية والفقه الإسلامية والسيرة النبوية قد نظموا ممالكهم على قواعد العدل والإحسان والمماساة وكراهة البغي والعدوان فعدمت دولتهم واستقامت أمورهم. So when they came to us after crusades and colonization, they took our books and resources, read our seerah and tariq, our qawaneen, they took from what is good, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lifted up their nations. And this one no one can deny. The non-Muslims, when they came to us, why do they have our masahif? What do you think they're doing with that? Why do they have all these books? They have for a reason. And if someone were to say, what's the proof? I'm going to give you an example of what they've taken from us. Islamic contributions to West society are irrefutable. So much so that a lot of projects were being paid and funded for it, they had to be stopped because it was exposing a lot of Europe is not Europe. And the only thing about European, that's not even the name is European. Europe as the name comes from the story of a Greek, right? It's a Greek story of a young girl from Lebanon. So Europe, even the story of Europa and the bull, it's not even European. That's their sign. Right? If you go to they have Europe, they have a little girl sitting on a bull. That's their symbol. The whole story is not even from Europe. Right? What else is not from Europe? It's very important. There's so much written on this. But look what he said here. When they barred our system, Allah lifted them. Sunnah kawniyya. So what's the problem then? When we didn't follow our system, we went down. Pay attention, brothers. If this is the problem, then we know the solution. And we already know what's coming. I'm going to mention in a second what's coming. But you will now understand what the secularists are trying to hide. They're saying you guys are weak because you guys are practicing. Our answer, but we were stronger before and we were more practicing. Make it make sense. Doesn't make sense there. Also, we have another problem. The Muslims, we know we're not practicing our deen that well. We know that. And we also know that colonization changed everything. And this is another one. The colonization has corrupted the land, which means that the Western nations, what is it that they are up with? They've taken our resources, or at least the resources of the third world. They've taken their beliefs and values, co-opted all that, then stamped it with Western. Right? For example, the value systems they take from us, the resources, that they can't deny. It's the sunnah of Allah. They put the resources, right, in where? The Middle East or between Africa to Asia. And so I mentioned this before, but the ulama mentioned why the ummah spreads east and west. Right? This is interesting. Why the ummah spreads from east to west. Right? This is the sunnah of Allah. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave our ummah. He said, I saw the magharibiha wa mashariqaha. I saw the east and the west of it, not the north and south of it. So this is a proof of Islam. Spread this way, not this way. Why? Most resources are there. You don't know that? Where's the biggest gold mines? Where all the money at? It's all there. The same place that we are today. It's the sunnah of Allah kawniyya. I'm going to mention it's coming. Whether you know it, you don't know it. They knew it, the Westerners. That's why they went there. 19th century, 20th century, they're in bad state. Right? Columbus, always looking for, right? The spices. Right? They didn't have nothing to eat. They were in a good state. Their diet wasn't good. And this is important. The British, the biggest colonizer, they have to. They're an island. They can't sustain themselves. But I'm saying this now. Go to Morocco as an example. And before that, Mansa Musa. I have to mention this because even today, many of the older people don't know this. Mansa Musa is considered the richest man in the history of the modern world, $400-something billion. This is not worth it, adjusted for inflation. Mansa Musa al-Mali, rahimahullah, Khalifa al-Maqrizi, he mentions him in the end of his book on Tariq, the last one he mentions, one of his biggest highlight, making Hajj. Because when for Hajj, he took so much people with him, so much sadaqah, he collapsed the economy of Egypt with sadaqah alone. Black man, multi-millionaires, praise Salah, makes Hajj, that's it. African Americans, most Westerners are looking to Mansa Musa. That's a legacy. Okay, how was he wealthy? He has a mine in Mali. Who took it from after? The Moroccans. Who took him after? The French. And then someone's going to come to you and say, why are you guys poor? Well, you have the same money that they made us rich. Right? Recently, Mali kicked out France from their country and said, get out, right? And they took back their mine. These things are hidden from it. Our curriculum is all full of this emptiness, right? But now it makes sense, right? It can't be the West, they were rich, they were poor. What happened? We were practicing yesterday. Timbuktu was where he was. But suddenly we forgot the Quran. No, we didn't forget the Quran. So what happened? Someone took our stuff. Which leads to the next point. What's happening in the future? What will happen for the Ummah? Which explains that the argument of secularists is only time-bound today. It works today, it won't work tomorrow. Just like it wouldn't work 300 years ago. Means if we were living 300 years ago, like let's say time of the Hajar or time of Salahuddin Ayyubi, no one's asking this question. So brothers and sisters, you have to know something. The questions are a sign of the time you're living in. So when someone asks why Muslims are poor, that's a bad question. Right? It's not a good question because you're assuming that it's because of Islam. Better question is, what did we do wrong that we're not following the footsteps of our ancestors? That's what the question about. What are we doing today wrong? We're not practicing, as Ibn Ashur is mentioning. We're falling short in our deen. But if we start practicing our deen, what will happen? Right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sunnah is going, we go up and we come back up. We go down, we go up. Qissa of Isa Mahdi. Let's bring this hadith. Many of us we know, but we have to go back to our aqidah. Right? This is what we need to teach to people. And if you want a nice book, right, it's already written on this topic, one of the best books on this. If you want to increase your iman and your love for the deen in the future, read the Muqaddimah, the beginning of Silsila Hadith Sahih Imam al-Albani. Read it. Islam al-Mustaqbal, or it's the future of Islam, or Mustaqbal al-Islam. The beginning of Shaykh al-Albani writes in Sahih, he starts with these hadith on purpose to give the Ummah the Bushra. It was beautiful. It's translated in English. Read it. Read all those hadith Nabi said it's going to happen for the Ummah. It's happening. Whether you know it, you don't know it. And Shaykh Salim Hilali, right, Shaykh al-Albani's student, and our Shaykh, he has a book, Al-Mustaqbiru al-Islami bi-Manhaj Salaf al-Kiram. Allah. This book is very important. Al-Mustaqbal al-Islami, the future of Islam, ala Manhaj Salaf, the honorable Salaf. He shows in there what's going to happen in the future of the Quran and Sunnah, based on Quran and Sunnah and Salaf. Okay, so this is a proper, right, not fiqh al-waqi' of the other people, Ahl Bid'ah. We don't need their books. We have these kind of books. And in there he talks about something, many Muslims, they don't realize it, but they need to know. How will the Ummah go back up? He has one section. I'm going to come back to Hayd Isa in a second. He has a part where he mentions page 287. He has discussion 285. Al-Quwwa al-Iqtisadiyya. The Ummah, Allah prepares for them economic strength. Now right now, we're saying, where is that? Shaykh al-Albani, he writes, rahimahullah, he brings the Shaykh, قال Shaykhana, he said, Imam al-Albani, when he brings the hadith, لا تقوم الساعة, the hour will not be established, حتى تعود أرض عربي مروجا وأنهارا, until the Arab lands go back to rivers and meadows. Hadith Muslim. He said, this is a glad tidings of the Prophet ﷺ, that the Ummah is going to increase, or its economic output is going to increase by way of farming land, and land like this of vegetation. And this, how do we know this? Because this is what the hadith is saying. We're going back to that. What does meadows and water tell you? It means irrigation, agriculture. Sounds right. Most of the countries do have a good output. He said that's a glad tidings the Ummah is coming back to its economic strength. And he brings other hadith like this. And he mentions these are, is it Sahih? Again, Sahih, he mentioned that. And Shaykh Salim, he goes more into that. He mentions that Allah is preparing the Ummah, its manners, its economy, even its people. And I want to mention the hadith many of us we know about Isa, and when he comes back, alayhi salam, in time Mahdi, this period, the second of it, golden period, or the future golden period, after the Dajjal is killed, after Ya'juj and Ma'juj are destroyed, what's going to happen? So this is the point we have to mention, what's going to happen then? So after all of that, it's going to be said, يُقَالُ لِلْأَرْضِ, Allah is going to say to the earth, or will be said to the earth, إِئْتِنِي ثَمَرَاتِكِ, or bring me your thamarat, وَرُدِّي بَرَكَتِكِ فَيَوْمِئِذٍ تَأْكُلُ الْعِصَابَ مِنْ رُمَّانَ. And so it's going to be said to the earth at that time, bring forth your blessings. that you have inside of you. And what's going to happen then? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to bring out from the earth a pomegranate big enough for a whole tribe of people to eat from. Pomegranate. One fruit, brothers. You can read the hadith yourself. One, right? And it says then a shelter, right? The skin of that pomegranate, the rind will be big enough to make a tent out of it. And the milk of the animals will be so full. And the number of people will be sufficient for everybody. And it will be so much benefit and blessing for the people. Until everyone's going to become wealthy, and this is the golden period coming. That's the aqeedah, the optimism that we have. Pay attention. That's coming. Whether you know it, you don't know it, or you're ignorant about it, or you don't care about it. Why am I saying this? Because imagine now we're telling us that the ummah is down. Well, it's coming. Look forward. But I have another question. What is Isa alayhi salam upon? Isa al-Mahdi going to come ala what? Kitab wa Sunnah, ala manhaj salaf. And how do we know that? Because Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Hadith Abu Hurairah and others, he told the Sahaba, you guys are going to fight at the end of times. You. Now we know the Sahaba are not going to fight because they're going to pass away by then. So Ibn Hajar says, why did he say you to the Sahaba when he knows they're not going to live that long? Because in the Hadith, Nabi said, whoever lives 100 years is not going to be here. So Ibn Hajar says, you means you and whoever is upon your manhaj. There's no, see guys, you follow me? Shaykh Salim mentioned this. There's no Ahl Bid'ah at that time. Wala Khawarij. Wala Jama'at. Very important. Because where is Dajjal coming from? Some hadith mentioned from his A'rad. From the A'rad comes Dajjal. Khawarij. These are hadith people that miss it tamaman. They don't even understand. The time we're going, we're already in the busy right now. Someone may say, what are you guys doing in the masjid? What do you think we're doing? We're preparing the groundwork for that future coming. Ala kitab wa sunnah manhaj salaf. What do you think is going to be future? What was Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam sahaba upon? It's going to come the other way. But see, al-bid'ah, they don't have that sharaf. They have nothing on that. Well, where does it say the jama'ah is going to be there or other groups? I'm saying this because it's the deen bringing the dunya, and the deen is the ghaya, and that's the wasila, the means. Today, someone's saying, why you guys don't have the wasila? We have. We have the means to it, but Allah decreed. That's Allah's decree. It's coming. But what's wrong with us? That some of us, we don't believe that because we don't understand what kind of aqeedah is that. It also then leads to another question, which is on their side. Now we turn the question on to them. Do you think secularism is the output of your aqeedah? Is that true? The answer is no. Secularism didn't produce your society. You're skipping all Christian and Jewish contribution to your society because you guys become atheists only relatively recent. So that's one problem. Second problem is you're also ignoring our contributions. Muslims give a lot of contributions. So much so, there's a book here written by a non-Muslim, John Maqdisi, right? His name is George. He's a well-known Orientalist. He has a book, The Islamic Origins of Common Law. And it shows you how Western common law, it's 107 pages, guys. So it's almost like a PhD. 107 pages showing how Western judicial system is taken from the Sharia. For example, where did they get the jury from? We have 4 witnesses. They like the idea. They said we gotta have a jury when we go to court. You gotta have somebody there. At that time, brothers and sisters, the Muslims were so powerful. They were looking at our systems. Napoleon, go read about him. He's a very interesting character. Napoleon, is he Muslim or not? Wallahu a'lam. He tricked us one time, right? And the second time, we don't know. But he did say he was Muslim, but it was more political, right? But Napoleon himself, he liked the deen, Islam. He respected the Quran. Napoleon, guys, that guy is not a Muslim from France. He respected Islam. And that's why there's an overlap between French inheritance law and Islamic law. You can check it yourself. Our inheritance and theirs is kind of close, right? Napoleonic laws, you can read about it. These things are hidden from our history, and someone's going to say, what's wrong with Muslims? What's wrong with you? You don't know your deen. That's the problem. You don't have the confidence that you require because you fall for the argument. The argument is flawed from the beginning. But brothers and sisters, see how now you can explain many things. Number one, Sahaba. They're upon deen, they were up. So if we follow them, we're going to get what they had. Another thing we also need to pay attention to is that if this is the case, then the reality is it's only a matter of time. Secularism, it doesn't only make the better lifestyle. We already mentioned some of the problems. So while their material wealth is going up, we can attribute their material success to other reasons. But we also have to highlight something that's uniquely theirs. Suicide. Right? This is uniquely atheistic and secular, and we talked about this, and Phil Zuckerman himself admits it. Okay, even this guy who himself was a secularist, he admits it that people of faith live longer. Right? Atheism does have a problem with their belief of staying alive. Right? And I said last week, and I'll say it again, that this actually it undermines the whole argument. Right? Because if religion protects you from killing yourself, then what measure are you judging? Right? You're telling me healthcare is so good, you're going to use it. You're going to decide. Most likely someone will commit suicide. So suicidality is suicide is connected to kufr. Uniquely, atheism and disbelief, suicide is connected. Muslims have the lowest level. Some may say, why Muslims don't commit suicide? The most comparatively, why we have the lowest levels? Because we believe Qadr Qadha. Single-handedly, Muslim, when something bad happens, we say, Alhamdulillah, it's Qadr of Allah. We put it to Allah's decree, we feel good. The non-Muslim, something goes wrong, he blames himself. Because all you got, there's no God, right? So it's on you, something wrong with you. This guy was able to get the money, you're poor, you're the problem. If you're the problem, there's only one solution. As some of them say, if there's no reason why you came into the world, there's no reason why you can't get out. A'udhu billah, right? This is the aqidah. A'udhu billah. That's how they think you. I don't know why I came in. Well, you can always go out. This is uniquely atheistic. So we have to ask them a question. You are making the success of secular society a singular causation. But then the one thing that is your contribution, you're trying to underplay it. And I give you the example of this. And I said it before. Take a look at the Human Development Index if you want to see a proof. You can research it yourself. When they give you the top countries in the world, where do they put Muslim countries? This is a question people always wonder. So I'll give you one example before we finish. If you go to those kind of indexes, you'll see they usually put like non-Muslim countries as number one, somewhere in Scandinavia, Denmark or Norway or something like that. And the Middle East, for example, despite having lots of money and lots of deen, last time I checked, right, Dubai is 34 out of 189 countries. Well, I don't know how. Right, Dubai, right, with 7-star hotels, right, and small population, big money, is 34. So the question is, why so low? They say, oh, because of human rights violation. Okay, and Norway, which is up there, has amongst the highest, right, rates. It's a Christian society, first of all, and in Finland, which is amongst the highest, has amongst the highest suicide rates. But they don't count for that. In their judgment, there's no column for suicide because that's going to take away the whole thing. You guys following me? You guys, someone giving an award to yourself, right? Muslims, I thought only back home people do this stuff. This kind of scams, when someone say, I'm the best. How do you know? Because I said so. And that kind of stuff. What about your suicide? No, we don't count that. So what's the whole point of Human Development Index? You're not developing. This is the point I'm hiding. If Dubai is the 34th country, I have a big question, brothers and sisters. How do you judge that? If you don't know, I'll tell you now. They judge the countries the following. If you're in the Cold War, if you're with the Allies, first world. You're with the communists, second world. If you're not in the war, third world. And if you're not in the war and fighting, fourth world. That's their judgment. So we have a question, Middle East today. Is Middle East second world, third world, first world? According to this understanding, they will call it third world or developing. Or how is Dubai developing? How is Saudi Arabia a developing country? And Russia is second world? How about a country that didn't fight in that war? So you see how this categorization is problematic too, right? First, second, third. Why are we using this language? What does third world mean? It means you're ta'ban. You're just getting roads. And then when the people are going to Dubai, they're like, mashallah, is it better than America? But that's the problem. When you believe you're first world, because someone told you, and then you don't have first world standards. So brothers and sisters, this also shows you that their measuring stick is also biased. We don't judge based on this, because if the human rights violation is the issue, the first violation of human rights is human life. Last time I checked, first violation of human rights is human life. If you're not living longer than other people, then you must be a bad country, and that's it. And this is why today we must take back the narrative. We cannot just accept these measures. And this is important for the people who are going to university, people back home who think the West is the best. This is what they believe, because they've been told this. They don't know the details of these matters. To finish, today as Muslims, we know now why our ummah is weak at the moment, because of the fact that we're far from our deen. Collectively, not individually, collectively as a whole body. And also Sunnah of Allah, they test us with poverty and difficulty, the same way He tests us with prosperity and wealth. So sometimes we have, sometimes we don't have. We also have to understand that our deen is the source of our izzah. It's not the other way around. Because Allah gives the Quran, فِيهِ ذِكْرُكُمْ يعني أي شرفكم. So Allah says in the Quran, we send down a book for you, which is in it your dhikrukum, Ibn Abbas says sharfukum, your honor. The Quran is our honor. Some people say, put the Quran behind us, we'll make it. No. And the proof of it is that the decline of the Ottoman Empire was because of that. The decline of Spanish with the Al-Andalus was because of that, and etc. You can read the Tariq, the ulama have mentioned this point. We also need to pay attention to the importance of history, studying it and knowing it, because today's time, they hide it from us, these points, and we didn't learn it. Because ilm tariq, when do you study it? You study at the end of your dirasa, the end of your study. Because it's not ilm wajib, right? It's not ilm wajib, it's kind of ilm fard kifaya, but it's most of it is ilm al-nafl wal-fada'il, yani it's a knowledge that goes back. So people who are experts in it, they tend to be more knowledgeable about everything else. So our studies, tariq, history comes at the end. So if you don't know it though, you need to know some basics. So that's what the ulama say, the basic tariq you have to know is the seerah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what happened after, right, with the Sahaba, the basics, you have to know these, right, because that's Iman. But here's the problem today, we don't know tariq. Then now imagine a young student in university, anyone someone says, well, why are you in my country? What's wrong with your country? And then you think like, you're right. Today on social media, you have people that have it say, well, what a Muslim country be? Who's asking that question? Some miskin, he doesn't know nothing. Do you see academic ask that question? No, because academics, they have books written. But someone who is ignorant, who is trying to play into someone ignorant. So we have to try our best to understand these points, and also one of the values of knowing the history. Right? Because one of the poets, he said, وَمَنْ جَمَعَ تَارِيخَ إِلَى صَدْرِهِ أَضَافَ أَعْمَارٍ إِلَى عُمُرِهِ. Whoever he gathers history in his chest, he adds lifespans on top of his own life. Right? So if you want to live long, no more history. طيب, inshallah, we finished this much. Next week we'll kind of summarize, inshallah ta'ala, all the arguments we made so far. Because there are other arguments, but they're weak. These are the most important ones. So next week we'll try to finish all of what we've been saying the last couple of months or so.